winter of 1397 fell like a harsh sentence upon the kingdom. Snow piled against the stone walls of Thornwick Castle, turning the world beyond its gates into a white wasteland where only the most desperate or foolish would venture. Within the great hall, lords and ladies dined on roasted meats and warm breads, their laughter rising with the heat from the massive hearths, while beyond the castle walls, villagers huddled in their homes, praying their stores would last until spring's thaw. In the depths of the castle's kitchens, Tessa Ormond moved with practiced efficiency, her slender fingers working deftly as she arranged herbs around the rim of a silver platter. At 22, she had served as an undercook in the royal kitchens for 5 years, rising from a scullery maid through diligence and an uncanny talent for flavoring even the simplest dishes. Her mother had been the castle's herbwoman before consumption took her 2 winters past, leaving Tessa with knowledge of plants that extended beyond mere seasoning. More saffron in the sauce, Tessa, master cook Bertram bellowed, his face reddening as he surveyed the preparations for the evening's feast. His lordship expects perfection, especially with the Earl of Westmoreland visiting. Yes, master cook, Tessa replied, though she knew the pinch she had already added was sufficient. The kitchen was a battlefield of its own kind, and she had learned to choose her skirmishes wisely. Tessa believed with unwavering certainty that her place was fixed by birth and circumstance. The daughter of a castle servant could never aspire beyond her station. Duty, hard work, and acceptance of one's lot were the virtues her mother had instilled in her. The highborn have their world, and we have ours, her mother would say. Best remember the difference. Yet in quiet moments, when the kitchen fires burned low and she prepared her own simple meals from the leavings of grand feasts, Tessa dreamed of more. Not riches or fine clothes, but a life where her knowledge and skills might be valued beyond the walls of a nobleman's kitchen. A life that was her own to shape. The kitchen door swung open, bringing a blast of cold air and the tall figure of Daniel Pembroke, the castle's master falconer. With his weathered face and keen grey eyes, he commanded respect even from the nobility. He had come to Thornwick 5 years ago, bringing with him birds of such quality that Lord Thornwick had immediately appointed him Master of the Mews. Master Cook, Daniel called, stamping snow from his boots, Lord Thornwick requests pheasant for tomorrow's hunt breakfast. Bertram cursed under his breath. We've none prepared. The last were used for today's feast. I can prepare them, Tessa offered, wiping her hands on her apron. I've finished the sauce for tonight's venison. Daniel's gaze fell on her, and Tessa felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen fires. He had always treated her with a courtesy unusual for someone of her station, sometimes lingering to speak of herbs and their uses with a knowledge that surprised her. My thanks, Mistress Ormond, he said with a slight bow that made Bertram roll his eyes. As Daniel turned to leave, he paused. There's word from the village. The miller's youngest died last night. Winter fever. A hush fell over the kitchen. Winter fever had already claimed 3 children in the village this season. God rest his soul, Tessa murmured, making the sign of the cross. She thought of the small bundle of dried herbs she'd sent to the miller's wife last week, too little, too late. Indeed, Daniel said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that spoke of shared concern. I ride to the village tomorrow with some provisions from his lordship. After he departed, Bertram muttered, Back to work, all of you. The dead will keep, but Lord Thornwick's feast won't wait. That night, long after the feasting ended and the great hall emptied, Tessa remained in the kitchen, preparing broths from bones and vegetable ends. These would not grace the Lord's table but would instead be carried to the village on the morrow, her small defiance against the rigid hierarchy that declared such resources too good for common folk. You should be abed, came a voice from the doorway. Daniel stood there, carrying a small leather sack. Tessa straightened, pushing back a strand of copper hair that had escaped her cap. As should you, Master Pembroke. Daniel, please. He approached, setting the sack on the table. I brought these from the mews. Falcon's down feathers. Soft enough for a pillow to ease the sick. Tessa stared at him, puzzled by this kindness. You risk much, giving away his lordship's property. They're mine to give. A shadow crossed his face. I've seen too many die needlessly in winter. Something in his voice made Tessa look more closely at this man she thought she knew. You speak as one who has known hunger. Daniel's expression hardened then softened as he met her gaze. I have known many things, Mistress Ormond. Not all of them fitting for a falconer to speak of. He nodded toward her pots. And you risk much yourself with this midnight charity. The leavings would be wasted otherwise, she replied, turning back to her work. We both know that's not entirely true. He stepped closer, examining the herbs she had laid out. Feverfew and willow bark. Remedies, not seasonings. Tessa froze. Such knowledge could be deemed witchcraft if whispered in the wrong ears. I merely follow my mother's teachings. Your mother was wise, he said. And you honor her memory well. After a pause, he added, I could deliver these to the village tomorrow, along with the down. Their eyes met over the steaming pot, and Tessa felt something shift between them, like a door opening where there had previously been only solid wall. I would be grateful, she said finally. Though I don't understand why you trouble yourself with village matters. Daniel's smile held secrets. Perhaps for the same reason you brew remedies by candlelight, Tessa Ormond. Because we can. The following morning, as Daniel prepared to leave for the village, Tessa approached the mews with a small bundle wrapped in clean cloth. More than broth, she explained, handing him the package. Bread with honey and herbs to strengthen the blood. For the children. Daniel took it, his gloved hand briefly touching hers. You are more than an undercook, Tessa Ormond. And you, I suspect, are more than a falconer, Daniel Pembroke, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. His eyes crinkled at the corners. Perhaps we are both precisely what we need to be at this moment. As winter deepened, their unlikely alliance grew. Daniel would bring word from the village of who was ailing, Tessa would prepare remedies disguised as kitchen provisions. On Sundays, when the kitchen staff had their half-day of rest, they would sometimes walk along the frozen pond within the castle walls, speaking of herbs and birds and carefully of themselves. My father was a physician in London, Daniel revealed one such afternoon as they stood watching ice crystals form on the bare branches of an oak. He treated both nobility and common folk until the sweating sickness took him. Tessa looked at him in surprise. A physician's son becomes a falconer. A physician's son who spoke too freely about treating all people equally becomes a falconer, he corrected with a rueful smile. After my father died, I found myself suddenly unwelcome in certain circles. Falconry was a skill I had learned for pleasure, it became my salvation. You gave up medicine? Tessa asked. Not entirely. His voice lowered. I still treat those I can, quietly. The birds provide cover for gathering certain herbs, and few question a falconer's comings and goings. Tessa absorbed this revelation, seeing him anew, a man who had chosen to step down in station rather than abandon his principles. It contradicted everything she had been taught about the natural order of things. And you? Daniel asked. Did you never wish for more than the kitchen? Tessa hesitated, suddenly aware of how close they stood. I wished, but wishing doesn't change what's possible. Doesn't it? His breath formed clouds in the cold air between them. I've seen you with the village children. You have a healer's touch. I have a servant's hands, she countered, showing her reddened, work-roughened fingers. Daniel took her hand in his, turning it palm up. I see a healer's hands. Knowledge lives here, not in soft skin or fine clothes. Before she could respond, the chapel bell rang, calling them back to their respective duties and stations. Yet as they parted, Tessa felt the first crack in her certainty that one's birth determined one's fate. As January yielded to February, whispers of a grand feast to mark Candlemas spread through the castle. Lords from neighbouring estates would attend, bringing with them prospects for marriages and alliances. The kitchens became a flurry of preparation, with Tessa working from dawn until well past midnight. 3 days before the feast, disaster struck. Master Cook Bertram, sampling wine for the feast, collapsed with a strangled cry. The kitchen fell silent as he was carried to his quarters, face ashen and breathing laboured. Apoplexy, pronounced Father Thomas, the castle's priest, after examining him. He may recover with God's grace, but not in time for the feast. Lord Thornwick himself descended to the kitchens, his lined face taut with displeasure. Who among you can manage in Bertram's absence? He demanded of the assembled staff. The kitchen workers looked at one another in fear. Preparing daily meals was one matter, orchestrating a feast for nobility was quite another. Mistress Ormond has the best knowledge of seasonings, my lord, ventured Agnes, the oldest of the kitchen maids. And she knows all the master's recipes. Lord Thornwick's gaze fell on Tessa like a physical weight. You? You're hardly more than a girl. Tessa curtsied, eyes downcast as befitted her station. I have assisted Master Cook for 5 years, my lord. I know his methods. You'll have to do, he said dismissively. But understand this, if the feast fails to please my guests, you'll be looking for a new position come spring. After he departed, panic rose in Tessa's throat. She had helped prepare countless meals, but never had the full responsibility for a noble feast fallen to her. Failure meant dismissal, and in midwinter that could mean death. That evening, as she pored over the feast plans by candlelight, the kitchen door creaked open. Daniel entered, carrying a small covered basket. Word reached me about Bertram, he said, setting the basket on the table. And about your promotion. Not a promotion, Tessa corrected, but a chance to fail spectacularly before the entire nobility of the Shire. Daniel smiled. Or a chance to prove your worth. What worth has a cook to lords and ladies? We are invisible until something displeases them. Is that what you believe? He opened the basket, revealing several small earthenware pots. That your worth lies in their opinion. The spicy-sweet scent of exotic spices filled the air between them. Tessa recognized cinnamon and cloves, but others were unknown to her. From my personal stores, Daniel explained. Cardamom, nutmeg, and saffron. Rare enough to impress even jaded noble palates. Tessa stared at the small fortune before her. I cannot accept these. They must have cost. Consider it an investment in your success, he interrupted. I have faith in your skills, Tessa Ormond. His confidence in her, more than the valuable spices, gave Tessa courage. As their hands reached for the same pot, their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away immediately. Why help me? She asked softly. Because I see you, he answered simply. Not the undercook, not Bertram's replacement, you. And I believe you deserve the chance to be seen by others as well. In that moment, something shifted in Tessa's heart, a tiny rebellion against a lifetime of accepting her prescribed place. Perhaps there was more possible than she had allowed herself to believe. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Tessa organized the kitchen with quiet authority, assigning tasks according to each person's strengths rather than the rigid hierarchy Bertram had maintained. She incorporated Daniel's spices judiciously, creating dishes that honor tradition while offering subtle surprises. On the feast day, the great hall was transformed with evergreen boughs and hundreds of beeswax candles. Lords and ladies in their finest attire filled the long tables as servants paraded in with the first course, delicate pastries filled with spiced meats, their crusts formed into the shapes of birds in flight. From her vantage point near the kitchen doors, Tessa watched anxiously as Lord Thornwick sampled the first bite. His eyebrows rose in surprise, and he immediately took another. Course after course emerged from her kitchen, soup of winter roots flavored with herbs and cream, venison glazed with honey and Daniel's cardamom, fish poached in wine with saffron. For the final surprise, she had prepared small cakes infused with lavender and drizzled with precious sugar, a recipe her mother had once created for a noblewoman's lying in. As the feast concluded, Lord Thornwick rose from his seat, gesturing for Tessa to approach. She did so with trepidation, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. It seems, he announced to his assembled guests, that illness has proven fortuitous. I have not enjoyed such a meal in many years. He raised his goblet. To the cook, whose talents have been hidden too long in Bertram's shadow. The nobles raised their cups, their faces flushed with wine and satisfaction. Tessa curtsied deeply, her face burning with unexpected pride. You will continue as head cook, Lord Thornwick informed her quietly as the guests returned to their conversations. With appropriate increase in wages. Thank you, my lord, Tessa managed, hardly believing what she was hearing. Don't thank me, he replied pragmatically. Cook like that again when the Duke visits at Easter, and we shall both be satisfied. That night, after the kitchen was finally cleaned and the staff dismissed, Tessa slipped away to the small herb garden, dormant under snow but still her place of solace. The full moon illuminated the white landscape, turning familiar paths into something magical and new. I hear congratulations are in order, came Daniel's voice behind her. Tessa turned, unable to suppress her smile. It seems I am now master cook in truth, not just in necessity. I never doubted it. He stepped closer. You were magnificent today. Even Lord Harcourt, who is known to complain about everything, asked for a second helping of your venison. I had help, she reminded him, gesturing to the starlit sky. Your spices made the difference. No, Daniel said firmly. You made the difference. The spices were merely ingredients, your knowledge and skill transformed them. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, their breath mingling in the cold air. I've been thinking, Daniel said finally, about what you said regarding wishing for more. Have your thoughts on that changed? Tessa considered his question carefully. I always believed that accepting one's station was wisdom, not cowardice. That dreaming beyond it brought only disappointment. And now? Now I wonder if perhaps duty to oneself might sometimes outweigh duty to tradition. She met his gaze directly. What do you think, Daniel Pembroke? You who chose to become less than your birth entitled you to be. I think, he said slowly, that I chose to become more of who I truly am, regardless of what the world might call it. His hand found hers in the moonlight, and this time neither pretended it was accidental. There is something I must tell you, he said, his voice dropping. Something I should have shared sooner. Tessa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter night. What is it? I did not come to Thornwick by chance. I chose this place specifically. He paused. Because of your mother. Tessa stared at him in shock. My mother? But how she was known among physicians, though few would admit it openly. A woman with knowledge of herbs beyond any university-trained doctor. His grip on her hand tightened. When I heard of her passing, I came to see if her knowledge had died with her. You came for her remedies. Tessa withdrew her hand, confusion and hurt washing over her. At first, Daniel admitted, "But then I met you and I saw that same gift in your hands, your instincts. I stayed for many reasons, Tessa, but you became the most important one." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the castle, shouting and the glow of torches. They hurried toward the sound, finding a group of villagers at the gate, carrying a still form on a makeshift stretcher. "Please," cried a woman Tessa recognized as the miller's wife, "my daughter has the fever, same as took my son. The wise woman in the next village says we should bring her to the healer here." The guards looked uncomfortable. "There is no healer at Thornwick, not since Mistress Ormond passed." "Actually," Daniel said, stepping forward, "there is." He turned to Tessa with a question in his eyes. In that moment, standing at the threshold between castle and village, between duty as defined by others and duty as she felt it in her heart, Tessa made her choice. "Bring her to the still room," she directed the villagers, ignoring the guard's surprise. "I'll need hot water and clean linen." Through the long night, Tessa and Daniel worked together to bring the miller's daughter back from the brink of death. His knowledge of physicians' remedies complemented her herbal wisdom, and by dawn, the child's fever had broken. As the exhausted parents wept with relief, Lord Thornwick himself appeared at the still room door, drawn by reports of the midnight commotion. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, taking in the scene with narrow eyes. Tessa stood straight, still wearing her kitchen apron stained now with herbal preparations. "My lord, I used my mother's remedies to treat this child's fever. I accept full responsibility." "As do I," Daniel added, coming to stand beside her. "I assisted with treatments learned from my father, who was a physician." Lord Thornwick's face remained impassive as he studied them both. "So the castle Falconer is a physician in disguise, and my cook is an herbalist. Any other secrets I should know about my household?" "No, my lord," they answered in unison. To their surprise, a thin smile appeared on the lord's face. "My wife suffered 7 winters with painful joints until your mother's remedies eased her, Mistress Ormond. I am not so foolish as to spurn useful skills, regardless of their source." He glanced at the recovering child. "It seems Thornwick has need of both your talents." As spring slowly awakened the land, changes came to Thornwick Castle. A small room adjoining the kitchens was designated as a still room where Tessa could prepare both feasts and remedies. Daniel divided his time between the mews and assisting with more serious ailments, his medical background now acknowledged openly. One evening, as they walked together along the castle walls watching the sunset paint the awakening fields gold, Daniel took Tessa's hand. "I have a proposal," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Lord Thornwick has offered me the old gamekeeper's cottage near the village. It has good soil for an herb garden and space enough for 2 people who might wish to combine their knowledge and their lives." Tessa's heart quickened. "Are you suggesting what I think you are, Daniel Pembroke?" "I'm suggesting that 2 people who have found their true calling might also have found each other," he replied. "That a physician's son and an herbwoman's daughter might create something new together, something that honors both their pasts and creates a different future." "What of my position as master cook?" Tessa asked, though her mind was already racing ahead to possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider. "Lord Thornwick suggests that Agnes has learned much from you these past months, and that perhaps your talents might better serve both castle and village in a different capacity." Daniel smiled. "It seems even lords can recognize when tradition should bend to accommodate something valuable." Tessa looked out over the greening landscape, thinking of all she had believed about duty and station. How certain she had been that one's birth determined one's path. How wrong she had been. "I believe," she said finally, turning to face Daniel fully, "that I would like very much to see this cottage." and its potential herb garden, he asked, eyes crinkling with hope. And its potential everything, Tessa replied, allowing herself at last to reach for happiness beyond the boundaries she had once accepted as immutable. As summer approached, a small cottage near the edge of Thornwick's lands came alive with activity. Inside, shelves lined the walls, filling with labeled jars of dried herbs and prepared remedies. Outside, neat beds of medicinal plants stretched toward the sun, tended by hands that moved with equal confidence among kitchen spices and healing herbs. And in the evening, when their day's work was done, a physician-turned-falconer and a cook-turned-healer would sit together by their own hearth, their hands intertwined, having discovered that the truest duty of all was not to tradition or station, but to the wisdom of the heart.